Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Lisa, we'll sprinkle in the question. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. Pam DeLizio, she will be on in just a minute or two. We want more neighbors to get on the call. If you want to be on the call, the best thing to do and ask her a question is to hit 00 on the keypad on your phone. Again, welcome everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. We're going to be on for the next hour or so, and we want you to ask Pam questions. The best way to do that is to press 00 on the keypad on your phone. If you want to provide us your email address so the office can send you email updates for what's going on in Harrisburg, please press 7. That's 7 on the keypad on your phone. Now, everybody that's on this call already, just wait another minute and I'll hand this call off to Pam. We want a few more neighbors to get on the call if we can. Again, this is a telephone town hall with Pam DeLizio. We want you to join us and stay on for the whole hour if you wouldn't mind. If you want to ask Pam a question, the best way to do that is press 00 on the keypad on your phone. That's 0 on the keypad on your phone. Press 7 on the keypad on your phone if you want to provide us your email address. So 00 on the keypad on your phone, and if you want to ask a question, and 7 if you want to provide email addresses for updates from Harrisburg. One more time, and then I'll hand this call off to Pam DeLizio. Now, again, welcome everybody that's not on the call, that just got on this call. We really want people to ask questions. The best way to ask those questions, you get to ask them live, by the way. So you just need to hit 00 on the keypad on your phone. And what happens is that you go to one of our people, they type up the questions so we know what's coming and we're prepared to answer you. And so you need to just press 0, talk to them. They'll type the question up for us, and we'll have you ask the question live. It's pretty much like talk radio, except we happen to be on the phone. That's what these telephone town halls are all about. Again, if you want to email updates from the office, the best way to do that is to press 7 on the keypad on your phone if you have a question. If you want to provide us that email address. So one more time, welcome everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. If you want to ask a question of Pam, please press 00 on the keypad on your phone. Now, Pam, I'm going to hand this call off to you. And if you wouldn't mind during your opening remarks for people to press 0 to ask you a question, that would be fantastic. Go ahead and take it away, please.
Thank you, Kurt. Good evening. This is State Representative Pam DeLizio. Welcome to our second Teletown Hall meeting. As many of you know, we have been holding town halls quarterly since July of 2011. And as of March of this year, we've been holding town halls monthly, both in-person town halls as well as teletown halls. And we had such a successful one in March, we decided to repeat it again in June. Tonight, we're going to discuss the state budget. The state budget, you've heard a lot about this, both on the radio, in the newspaper, on TV. It is definitely the focus in Harrisburg at the moment. And it's a very tough budget year. There is, in the current fiscal year we're in, about a $750 million deficit for this year's budget. That automatically creates at least that level of a deficit for the fiscal year 2014-2015 budget. Budgets, as you know, are about priorities. And not only the core responsibilities of government, but how best to ensure sufficient revenue to meet those core responsibilities of government. So I use your input and your feedback from all of the town halls when I am in committee meetings, in debate on the House floor, and we'll be using your questions and feedback this evening in the same way when I return to Harrisburg on Monday. Again, to ask a question, you're asked to dial #00.
Thank you so much, Pam. This is Kurt. I'm your moderator tonight. We appreciate everybody joining the call. As Pam had suggested before, if you want to ask a question, please press 0. That's 0 on the keypad on your phone, and press 7 on the keypad on your phone. If you wouldn't mind, we'll get your email address if you do that. We had a question come in earlier today, and it's about funding for the Philadelphia School District. And the question goes like this: will the state pass a budget that includes sufficient funding for the Philadelphia School District? Pam?
I appreciate that question. Certainly for those, I think, both in the Philadelphia part of the district as well as the Montgomery County part of the district, this question is very important to everybody. The state budget has identified, or the proposed budget of the governor from February has not identified many dollars in the way of additional funding for education across the board, let alone directed to the school district of Philadelphia. We have our school district population is 133,000. The next biggest school district population is the Pittsburgh School District at about 33,000. So we have just about 4 times more students than the next largest school district. What I know that the Philadelphia delegation is very focused on is trying to ensure that funding for this year happens in sufficient numbers so that we do not have a repeat of just the basic services or the tremendous cuts that the school district had to undertake in order to just open the doors this year. At the same time, we keep sort of patching the problem. We need to actually come up with the solution to fix the problem, which would be not only identifying a fair funding formula, but to ensure that that formula takes into account all the appropriate variables, and that's everything from what type of students are in each school district, what are the supports and the true costs of getting those children educated, to sustainable revenue stream to support that fair funding formula. We have a lot of work ahead of us.
We're going to take a question live if we can next. By the way, for the people who just joined Pam on this call, please press 00 on the keypad on your phone if you have a question. Press 7 if you want to provide us email updates. We're going to take Mike from Roxborough first. Mike, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Mike, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, is that me?
It is.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my question was if Ridge Avenue in Roxborough is a state highway, I'd like to know if the representative will get some funds to get this road fixed because of the winter we had. It's a pothole mess. And my son's car was actually parked on Ridge Avenue a little while ago, and somebody avoiding a pothole hit my son's car and destroyed it. I mean, simply because they're not filling these potholes on Ridge Avenue. I was wondering if it is a state highway, are you going to get some funds to fix it?
It is a state highway. It is on PennDOT's list. As you may or may not realize, there is a large water main project that will be taking place along Ridge Avenue, which will require digging up the street and then a total repaving. I think that will fix all of the concerns that constituents have been having and just continue to give us the very specific locations of those potholes. They get fed to PennDOT. They get put on PennDOT's list. We've seen them come out and fix quite a few. So if you'll call the office subsequently, we'll get the very exact location of where this event occurred.
Thank you, Pam. We're going to do our first survey question of the night. The survey question, you press 1 for yes or 2 for no. Let me give you the question first. Should the state liquor system be privatized, regardless if the revenue to be produced could be less than the revenue produced under the current system? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no, and let me repeat the question. Should the state liquor system be privatized, regardless if the revenue to be produced could be less than the revenue produced under the current system? 1 is yes, and 2 is no. And we really appreciate your participation. We're going to take Tom next. Tom, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Tom, you're from Roxborough. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, Pam. How do you stand on fracking?
You're referring to the Marcellus Shale? Just to make sure everybody listening knows what that's referring to.
You know, New York banned it, right?
The Marcellus Shale is a very valuable resource in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and as I've mentioned at many of the town hall meetings, that we need to continue to proceed to leverage that resource because of its value, but to do it in a way that holds the natural gas drillers accountable and to do it in the most responsible fashion. And by responsible, I'm referring to the Department of Environmental Protection operating in a way that ensures that air quality and water quality are not compromised in any way. I think that Act 13 of 2012, which created that impact fee, probably could have been stronger in terms of giving the Department of Environmental Protection more of an opportunity to regulate that industry, and we're continually working towards that.
Thank you, Pam. We're going to go to another survey question if we can. Assuming the development of a fair funding formula for education, should dedicated revenues be identified other than property taxes? Examples are the Shale project you were just talking about, or taxes on cigarettes. So if it's yes, press 1, and if it's no, press 2. Let me ask the question again. Assuming the development of fair funding formula for education, should dedicated revenue be identified other than property taxes, like the shale tax or taxes on cigarettes? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no. And next, we are going to take Judy. Judy, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Judy, what neighborhood are you from, and what's your question, please?
Okay, I'm from Wissahickon, and my question to you, Pam, is this. I know you're working on funding for the schools. What my question is, how about for special education? My granddaughter goes to Greenwood Charter, which you've been at. My other granddaughter goes to Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. They're facing a deficit. And although I know the schools need a lot of money, so does special education. And I'd like to know how you feel about that.
Well, there was a special education, thank you, Judy, there was a special education funding commission that was convened, and those recommendations have translated to a piece of legislation that is currently in the House of Representatives. And that legislation, previously they assumed that each school district had X percentage of special ed students, and I think the percentage was about 16%. There was really no understanding of how many special education students were within each school district. One of the recommendations is that a tiered system be developed, and it has been, and the tiered system identifies those with special education needs in 3 different levels, and there is different levels of funding associated with those tiers. So that will go a long way to help get the appropriate funding to students who have, whether they're moderate needs, very complex kinds of situations, or special needs that aren't as intense. So the bill and the legislation has not run in the House. It has passed out of the Education Committee. So I am familiar with that bill, and it will help to even get the funds, special education funds, to where they need to be. It's long overdue. You're correct.
Let's do another survey question, then we'll take a live question. By the way, if you have a question you want to ask Pam, please by all means press 0. That's 0 on the keypad on your phone. Should pensions be reformed in a hybrid plan, also known as a defined contribution or 401k, continues the existing unfunded liability or creates a larger unfunded liability? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no. Let me say this question again. It's fairly complicated. Should pensions be reformed if the hybrid plan, also known as a defined contribution or 401k, continues the existing of unfunded liability or creates a larger unfunded liability? 1 is for yes, 2 is for no. While you're all doing that, we're going to take another question right away if we can, and we are going to take it from Gloria. Gloria, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Gloria, please go ahead with your. What neighborhood are you from? I forgot to ask you.
I'm from Manioc in Roxborough.
There you go.
Manioc
Go ahead.
Hi, Pam. How you doing this evening? I would like to know, since this is AIDS Awareness Month, and they're asking questions, since I do sit on one board, they're asking the question: is there going to be any money, federal government to AIDS Foundation for research, for AIDS research? Is any money from the state going to go to them at all for AIDS research?
Gloria, I would have to go back. The budget, as you can well imagine, has literally thousands upon thousands of line items. There are specific, I want to refer to them as disease line items, ALS, epilepsy, There are line items along those ideas. There are also a CURE line item, a CURE, and that is dollars that go locally to local universities and hospital systems for research. And I'm happy to investigate that further and see if there is anything in any of those line items directed toward AIDS research. Be happy to do that. If you call the office sometime next week, we'll see if we have that answer for you.
And finally, our fourth survey and final survey question of the night, the proposed Clean Indoor Air Act, that's Clean Indoor Air Act, would eliminate smoking exemptions in places that are currently exempt, such as casinos, private clubs, residential care facilities. Would you support this legislation? If the answer is yes, press 1. If the answer is no, press 2. The question again. The proposed Clean Indoor Air Act would eliminate smoking exemptions in places that are currently exempt, such as casinos, private clubs, and residential care facilities. Would you support this legislation? 1 is yes, 2 is no, and we're going to take Bernadette next. Bernadette from Roxborough, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Bernadette, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'd like to know why the budget for the schools does not include special education. Now, I'm not talking about charter schools. I'm talking about regular public schools. There has been no special education money allotted. The children are being neglected.
We kind of had that question before. What's your reply to that, please?
There is definitely special education funding that is in the budget. It has been flat funded for a while. There has always been special education funding in the state budget. The proposed recommendations and proposed legislation from the Special Ed Funding Commission will help to direct those dollars to those most in need. So that will be a definite improvement.
Let's take another question. I want to remind people we have plenty of questions, but we want more. If you have a question, press 0. If you want to get email updates from Harrisburg, please press 7 on the keypad on your phone so we can get your email address. Tom's next. Tom, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Tom, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I'm from Roxborough, and my question is, when will the governor decide, or when will the state legislature make the governor expand the adult basic health care so that everybody here in Pennsylvania can get health care?
Well,
Pam?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Unfortunately, the legislature cannot make the governor do anything, most unfortunately. Those who were covered by adult basic, and that was discontinued in February of 2011, so it's been a couple of years now, and it was on this governor's watch, you're correct. Those individuals would be picked up if indeed the governor and the legislature would pass Medicaid expansion legislation. And I am very happy to say that a week ago Wednesday, we voted Medicaid expansion out of the Human Services Committee, which is a committee that I sit on. Whether or not we can get that piece of legislation called up on the House floor for a vote is totally an unknown, but I can assure you there are those of us working very, very hard at that, as well as working with the administration to try to persuade and help the governor understand that he can proceed with Medicaid expansion by simply opting in, still pursue his waiver plans for that, and we would have a win-win situation. It will be interesting to see what the next 10 days brings as this budget discussion unfolds. As you may recall, last June, the Senate introduced Medicaid and passed Medicaid expansion out of the Senate, and it was taken out of the welfare code when that reached the House. So we are, again, not only hopeful this year, but I actually have an amendment to run on a piece of legislation this coming week for Medicaid expansion for Pennsylvania. Again, that would cover those individuals who are covered by adult basic, and not only the 44,000 covered by adult basic, but the literally several 100,000 who are on that waiting list.
Let's take take another question if we can right away, and thank you for all the participation of people that are asking questions. Let's take Denise if we can next. Denise, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Denise, where you're from and what's your question, please?
I'm from Roxborough, and I'm a teacher with the Philadelphia district, and I'm a high school teacher. We have good teachers, and we have great students. We actually had 2 Millennium Scholarship recipients at our school this year, but we are stretched thin. I want to know, why can't we get some of the money from the fracking companies? They're using our resources, but our students' educational system needs the money. Why are they allowed to take our resources and not give back?
Well, Denise, thank you. And actually, I think that not only the students are great and deserving, but the teachers are absolutely wonderful. And I want to thank every teacher and principal and staff person who works at a Philadelphia Public School for stepping up and filling in just unbelievable voids and gaps that were left in the system this year. The impact fee that was passed in 2012, the governor chose not to support legislation that would be a severance tax, but in fact an impact fee. The lion's share of that impact fee stays within the municipalities where the drilling is occurring, and some of those additional dollars do find their way to other programs that are benefit more of the state and more of the citizens. But this is the reason many of us have introduced and support a Marcellus Shale severance tax. That tax and the revenue from that tax would be dedicated to programs that would indeed benefit the entire Commonwealth. And we are a Commonwealth. These are resources that come from our land, from our state, and there is a large group of us who think those benefits of those resources should be shared. I can tell you there is growing interest on both sides of the aisle, in both chambers, meaning the Senate and the House, for a Marcellus Shale severance tax. And again, the next 10 days up in Harrisburg are going to be very interesting to see what comes of that. But I will caution people to be alert to the fact that this tax has to be of a sufficient percentage. Competitive with our neighboring states, absolutely. We don't want to drive industry away, but fair to our citizens and competitive. We left ourselves short with the impact fee, and we left money on the table. We literally cannot afford to do that again.
Let's take Bob next. Bob, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Bob, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
Hello, my name's Bob, and I'm from Roxborough. As I understand it, even if there is a tax increase, whether from share or something else, one of the major issues that all school boards across the state of Pennsylvania are facing, along with the state, is underfunding pension and exploding pensions for teachers and for state employees, i.e., teachers make about 80% of the year-end salary after 30 years, so many of them are retiring between 57 and 61. And state employees, the way I understand it, when they retire, they continue to receive health benefits from the state of Pennsylvania. So where do you stand on the issue of pensions for state employees and for teachers? Because if we're going to get this money for the children, which I totally agree with, the way I read it, most of that money will go to the pensions that retired teachers have and state employees have, and really would not be coming to the actual programs.
Happy to have a discussion about that question. I think there's a few things. First off, particularly around the pension discussion, it is not simple, nor is it cut and dry. The current pensions, current employees, whether they're public sector or private sector, obviously we're talking about public sector employees here, those were all part of a collective bargaining agreement. those collective bargaining agreements could be renegotiated, obviously, but that would be going forward. If a collective bargaining agreement would go toward what they refer to as a give back, again, if that was part of the process and that's what the process produced, then that's what the process produced. But legally, there is no way to go backwards and reduce anybody's benefits. I mean, that was an agreement that was been made. That's an agreement that should be honored. In 2010, there was a piece of legislation that was passed and signed into law that would, over almost a 30-year period, help the pension to become funded up to an acceptable percentage, which is about 80%. We're somewhere in the low to mid-60s right now. Not as terrible as some states, but certainly not where we need it to be. By simply some true pension, and some of those reforms in 2010 included raising the retirement age to 65, doubling from 5 years to 10 years the amount of time to be fully vested, and those things will go a long way. The problem that we find ourselves in is not the fault of the employees, and I want to make that very clear, and we can discuss 2 hours worth of pension. The employer, who was the Commonwealth, chose to do some things over the last 20 years under both Republican and Democratic administrations that created the situation that we are in today. And one way to make that situation right is by paying that pension and paying that bill that is due. What I've been fascinated with in the 3 years I've been in office is that there are many revenue opportunities that have not been pursued and have been left on the table, and all of whether it be Marcellus Shale, taxing smokeless tobacco. Most people don't even realize that Pennsylvania is like the only state that doesn't tax smokeless tobacco products. We do not collect 100% of the sales tax revenue. All of those things add up literally to the hundreds of millions of dollars. So if we had exhausted all of our revenue opportunities, this would be a different discussion, but we have not. So I think the Act 120 of 2010, which is only at this point barely 3 years in effect, 11, 12, 13, 3.5 years in effect, has shown promise, and if we keep going down that line, but we need to meet our own obligation as the employer, the state as the employer, and one way to do that is by paying in our obligation, and the way to do that is having sufficient revenue, and that's by looking at these other revenue opportunities that we continue to leave on the table.
Let's take another question if we can right away from the audience. We'll take it. Let me get it queued up here if we can. We're going to take it from Richard. Richard, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Richard, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
Yes, it's Rich. I'm from Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania. And my question is, the school board here has determined they're going to put a school bus depot on Bala Avenue, which is a residential neighborhood, 30 buses, and we are very upset about this, and I wanted to know if you had any position on this issue.
Pam?
Yes, thank you, Rich. I am aware of that. I don't know that any definitive decision has been made from the information that I followed. Unfortunately, I was in Harrisburg last week when a civic meeting was held to address this. So in fact, I know no definitive decision has been made. I believe that the state contributed through a particular capital program serious dollars to the development of Bala Avenue. I would be standing with the residents and don't think that's an appropriate location for a bus depot. And the commissioners know that I am willing to work with them as well as the Neighborhood Club of Bala to either help the school board find an appropriate location. I don't think they're articulated or their vision of that part of Bala Avenue is an appropriate location. It clearly does not fit in with the master plan and the vision for that area.
Let's take another question right away from the audience if we can. It's going to be from Janet. Janet, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Janet from Roxborough, go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, how are you, Pam?
I'm good, Janet.
That's good. I feel as taxpayers, since we help fund the charter schools, there should be more transparency about the funds and the salaries of those administrators, the CEOs, and their funding sources. So I wondered how you felt about that.
Well, thank you, Janet. And I would have to check, but those are primarily taxpayer dollars that are funding charter schools. Other than non-operating revenue they may be raising, it is primarily tax dollars. It comes through the local school district to the charter schools, and all of those dollars should be absolutely transparent. I've made a note here to determine whether that level and degree of information is readily available, and if not, I will be finding out why not, because again, it is all public dollars. So thank you.
And thank you. Let's take another question right away if we can. By the way, one last time for this. If you want to ask another question, please press 00 on the keypad on your phone if you haven't done that so far. And if you want to get an email address in so we can give you email updates from Harrisburg, please by all means press 7. So 7 for email addresses, 0 for questions, just like Beth did. Beth, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Beth, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
Hi, I'm Beth. I'm from Roxborough, and my question is, I heard that there's a diabetic bill that's pending on the House, and I was wondering what Pam Delisio thinks about it. It's supposed to educate. It's supposed to encourage staff to be educated on diabetes and allow and permit unlicensed personnel to administer insulin and glucagon to the children who are diabetic. I'm just afraid. I want to get her thoughts, and I'm just worried about the repercussions should they be allowed to give insulin to the children.
Thank you. I am familiar with that particular bill. It's right now an amendment onto a bill that came out of the Education Committee. There's also a bill itself, I believe, sitting in the Health Committee. This bill has been under major discussion by the stakeholders, and by stakeholders I mean the American Diabetic Association, school nurses, obviously parents of children, etc. They think they've reached a compromise that is acceptable to all parties, although I can't say I'm certain that all parties are on board yet because this discussion is literally happening. That amendment to that bill was supposed to run twice this week, and twice it was pulled. That usually tells me that there's still more discussion to be had. The compromise they had reached was to allow glucagon, which is not insulin, to be administered by trained staff that were willing to do this if a school nurse was not in the building. And right now, given the situation, there are many buildings without a school nurse right there. So that's where that situation lies. I can be supportive of that amendment. As it was described to me, if insulin is given in a dose that's too little or too much, it could have an adverse effect either way. So they're working through what I believe should be a reasonable compromise, which should hopefully allay everybody's concerns and fears.
Let's take. We had a question that came earlier today, and this is about additional revenue for the budget. Can representatives provide Can Pam provide examples of additional revenue for the budget that does not involve taxpayer dollars? Pam?
Well, there are a number of revenue opportunities that, again, over the 3.5 years I've been in office have not seen pursued or pursued to the degree that they need to be. In addition to what we've talked about already, the Marcellus Shale severance tax, there is also, and the sales tax that I mentioned. Right now, we only collect 99% of that sales tax, not 100% of it. The percent we don't collect is thought to be for the efforts of businesses, for the effort of collecting the tax. And the reality is a lot of that is done by technology now, and a lot of big places like big box stores, not to name anybody specific, are really having a corporate subsidy given by the state by being allowed to keep that 1%. A conservative estimate, if we collected short of capping it to maybe $250 a month, a business could keep of that additional 1%, and the rest they would have to remit to the state, could net us upwards of $50 million. That adds up. That's significant. We also have not closed the Delaware loophole to the degree that we could have or should have. There is something called combined reporting, which would then have companies report their income and their expenses in such a way as to assure that whatever business was conducted in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania would indeed get their fair share of taxes. Right now, that does not happen. And that is a loophole that, has us have money that doesn't come into our general fund. Another opportunity is when we talk about the state store system. Those of us of a certain age refer to that, the fine wine and spirit stores as they're currently known. Right now, only 25% of those locations can be open on a Sunday. Out of the entire state, there's almost 700 of them. Only 25% by law can be open, and at that, they're limited to being open between noon and 5 p.m. If we were to open or permit all of them to be open, or as many as the market warranted to be open across the state, and went to extend those hours as well, we could raise upwards of $100 million. And what's been particularly frustrating was if we had done that 2 or 3 years ago, or when this administration started, or years before that, we could have been benefiting by that revenue all along. So there's some fairly straightforward opportunities to raise revenue that doesn't come out of the taxpayer's pocket.
We're going to bring on Danae next, and he has a question I think dovetails into some of this. Danae, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Danae, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I am from East Falls, and my question is, what issues are actually at the top of the budget, and why isn't education one of those issues? And what is your top priority for the state budget?
Well, my top priority is education, and I think I can say that education for many members of the House and Senate, I would hope is at the top of the budget. It's interesting how Harrisburg works. There's been a lot of discussion in the last week and a half that has to do with pension reform, because the governor has said he's not going to budge and even consider any other type of revenue opportunity like Marcellus Shale unless pension reform is passed. And again, the pension reform that's been proposed, again, without going into an hour's worth of details, does not approximate any type of reform. It simply maintains and in some instances makes bigger the current unfunded liability. So that's not reform, that's deferment, and in a significant way. So they are there. That's what seems to be driving the conversation over the past 8 to 9 days. As a lot of my colleagues have asked about pension reform, where do I stand on that? They're trying to sort out the details of what's being proposed on the Republican side, and these are Republican colleagues asking, is true pension reform, or is it just sort of pushing the problem further down? From what I've read and understood, and I understand a bit of it, it's been pushing the problem further down. So education is number one for us, but for the administration, I can't say.
I have. They've since left the call, but earlier, both. Let's see. Tina and Carl had questions relating to what is the status of gun legislation. Could you give us an update on that, please, Pam?
Sure. There is. I sit in 2 delegations within the House, the Southeast delegation, which is the 4 counties surrounding Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia delegation. We actually had a joint delegation meeting last week with the NRA, the National Rifle Association. It was over a piece of legislation that is intended to preempt local governments. There are many local governments across the Commonwealth who have passed laws on either lost and stolen guns, straw purchases, and things in that gun control arena, and technically those laws are not legal. They're technically not enforceable because gun control is to emanate from the state only, so there's some degree of uniformity. The NRA wanted to meet with the 2 delegations to see if many of the members would be inclined to pull their amendments off this piece of legislation and see if we could open a dialogue, and I'm always hopeful that a dialogue has begun and not begun and ended all in the same meeting. No conclusions were reached at all by any stretch of the imagination. So that piece of legislation, those amendments, my guess is will stay intact. Those amendments are a universal background check. To me, there's absolutely no reason why any piece of weaponry, any gun, should be exempted from a background check. And that's all this very short 2-paragraph piece of legislation, if it's freestanding, or amendment, if it's amended onto another piece of legislation, does. So I'm hoping that at some point we have another discussion with the NRA. It was very interesting to be in the room and to be a part of that discussion. So at the moment, there's nothing actually moving.
Earlier from Lisa today, she wanted to know your intent on supporting or not supporting fracking on state parks and forest lands. Your thoughts, please.
Very happy to give my thoughts on that. I think our state parks and state forest lands are very, very, very special. There are plenty of other land and opportunity where unconventional wells are being drilled, and I was supportive of the moratorium that was in place. I'm very disappointed that the governor has issued an executive order to permit drilling, and have been active in trying to have that stopped, and will continue to do that.
And what was I going to say? We're kind of getting to our 45-minute mark, and we're going to try and get in a couple more questions. What can be done to help folks navigate DPW with a little bit more ease? The applications are cumbersome and seems the offices are entangled with insufficient means. Your thoughts, please, Pam.
Well, that is absolutely correct. And in fact, yesterday I made a commitment to start to refer to DPW as the Department of Human Services. The bill's passed the House, it's jammed in the Senate, it's all but passed in the Senate. They just haven't brought it to a floor vote. So my commitment is to refer to this as the Department of Human Services, the name that I think it should have. We have definitely had a number of conference calls with the department and with the appropriate people in the department as it pertains to processes, whether they have been providers and institutional types of providers that have been absolutely jammed, particularly along the lines of the billing processes, or if they are our individual constituents trying to avail themselves of very necessary safety net benefits. We hear repeatedly, paperwork's lost, nobody to answer the phone, you can wait for hours and leave, if it's even possible, more frustrated than when you went in. I think the department is very, very aware of that. I found it interesting that the department said that in order to implement Medicaid expansion, they would need to hire over 700 people. And when you compare that to other states, or other states who would sign up a comparable amount of new people in the Affordable Care Act via Medicaid expansion, have hired way, way, way less than that. I think the department is acknowledging how grossly understaffed they are and I feel terribly that their technology is so behind the times that they constantly are tripping over themselves, which creates that level of frustration. So I encourage constituents to continue to bring those issues to the office. And we continue to help square away those problems and at the same time try to get the process fixed in Harrisburg.
From Karen earlier, are all children supposed to have health insurance in Pennsylvania?
Yes, all children, and this is my understanding, and I believe I'm correct, are eligible for CHIP. There are quite a few children who are eligible and are not signed up for CHIP. So there's always hopefully a campaign to inform folks. There was a lot of good thinking that Medicaid expansion in particular under the Affordable Care Act, when the parents have health insurance, they much quicker relate to the fact that, oh yes, and my children too. So we're particularly, a group of us want to see Medicaid expansion happen to cover as many adults as possible. There is a correlation there, whatever the reason. There is a correlation there that when the parents are covered, children then become covered. So in the meantime, if you know some children who are without health insurance, please call the office and see if we can't get them signed up for CHIP.
Another question came in earlier from Jim. People have been complaining about the higher cost of driver licenses and tolls due to the passage of the transportation bill. What are your thoughts on that, please?
Well, I think the tolls, the turnpike tolls, that was not necessarily part of the transportation funding bill. That had happened a few years back, where those toll increases would happen on a regular basis. Driver's license fees, registration fees, those types of things are starting to kick in this year. Those fees hadn't been increased in forever. And quite frankly, those are the types of fees and revenues. They're user fees that are needed in order to be able to use our roads safely, to keep our roads in good condition. So those increases were reasonable, and you have to remember then some of those fees, the registrations now are stretched out more. Instead of every year, it will be every other year. But yes, there were definitely increases, but the increases were definitely for good and sufficient reason. And just to let folks know, on average, after 5 years, those total amount of those increases affiliated with the transportation funding bill would equal about $2.50 per motorist per week. So it might seem like more is coming out of your pocket, but they have been the pretty consistent projections that I have seen in terms of the cost per motorist. So for $2.50 more a week, we have better roads, less frustration, less wait time, et cetera.
Et cetera.
Et cetera.
From Jennifer, with the failure of the bridge in Delaware 495, are people now watching the bridges more closely in Pennsylvania? This is from Jennifer.
Well, Jennifer, our bridges were already on lists of not doing too well. Over half of our bridges in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania were substandard. So actually, your question following the question about the increase in revenues for fees and licenses, et cetera, this is perfect. These conditions are unsafe. In many areas, the Secretary of Transportation has had to, or counties have had to, close bridges down or restrict the weight limit that could cross a bridge because of what poor condition they were in. And all of this then causes us to have to take a longer detour to get from point A to point B. Fire safety. You know, if a fire truck or an ambulance can't cross a bridge because it's been weight limited and has to take a detour, that takes longer for help and emergency responders to get to a citizen who might be in distress. So we have been, these bridges have all been well documented, and that was one of the compelling reasons, I think, finally, that we got a transportation funding bill passed, because we ranked very high up there in the country with the number of deficient bridges in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
And from Holly, are there many local farm markets in Philadelphia? Food costs are awfully high.
There are actually within the 194th, I can name 5 or 6 farm markets right within. There's one at Gorgas Park on Friday, one in East Falls and on Main Street in Manayunk, and on Midvale Avenue in East Falls on Saturdays. There's Henry Got Crops right here on Henry Avenue. They're at least Tuesdays and Fridays. Bala Cynwyd at the GSB building parking lot on Thursdays. So we are blessed to have any number of farmers markets right within the 194th.
The next question is, and this is from Jill, how can we make college more affordable to the average student? Pennsylvania state schools are very, very expensive.
Our state schools and our tuition, it has been a concern and a problem, and in many places in Europe, tuition is actually free, and they see that as a priority and that there's a return on that investment. In Pennsylvania, through PHIA, the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, we have tried to, they've done very well over time with some of their revenues that have allowed them to issue grants. These are not loans, grants to many, many of our students and many, many folks in the 194th. I have access to a list of them, and I'm surprised at the hundreds upon hundreds of students who do get PHIA grants. So the goal would be to try to get those grants higher and to work with particularly the state university system, because that's the only system we control. The rest are private systems, to try to see how we can make this more affordable, either by deferring student loans after somebody graduates, and therefore, because it's not fair for these students to have, some of these students have more debt coming out of school than my first house and even my second house, and I can't even imagine starting off your career and life in adulthood and professionally with that kind of debt affiliated with student loans. So there may be some debt forgiveness that helps after students get out, and for those that are out, people often talk about controlling costs, and obviously if there's any way for the state to continue to appropriate additional dollars, those state universities and state schools have been pretty heavily cut over the last couple of years as well. Again, it goes back to chasing available revenue that helps to allow those appropriations, those preferred appropriations, to be higher than they've been.
And this from Tracy, and perhaps you can dovetail in a bill you're working on, a women's veterans bill. How can we keep seniors at home without having to place them in a nursing home? My mom wants to stay home and pass away at home. That's from Tracy. So if you could kind of take on both missions on this, Pam, that would be great. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Well, very quickly, the Women's Veterans Health Care is a resolution that will be introduced hopefully next week to look at the needs specifically of women veterans. Women veterans make up about 9 to 10% of the veteran population of Pennsylvania. We want to know if women's veteran needs are, if they're different from men's needs, and if so, in what arenas, and if so, are we in a position to meet them, or what needs to be done differently. So that will be introduced next week. Excited to do that. In terms of housing and services for older adults, there's actually services out there. They're not easy to navigate. We're just in the process of finishing up a report with the Joint State Government Commission looking at barriers and access to having people live in the least restrictive setting, which is usually their own home, and what supports are needed along that continuum to make that happen. So right now there are definitely supports out there. I think a lot of consumers find it very difficult to navigate that. Again, our office can help to some degree, at least point people in the right direction. The goal is no wrong door, meaning whoever you call will put you on the path that you need to be. For a long time now, there's been what they refer to as a rebalancing between home and community-based services and skilled nursing facility services. The skilled nursing bed days in the Commonwealth have actually dropped a lot. It's still costly care because they tend to be our sickest older adults, so their cost of care is much higher. So there is an ongoing effort, an absolute ongoing effort, to continue to provide better and more home and community-based services. So our senior citizens, if that's the choice that they want to make, then we're going to make that vision a reality for them.
And our final question comes like this, if we can. It's from Bill. Can Pennsylvania handle more casinos? Would they bring in more revenue to help people in the Commonwealth?
Well, Bill, I do not know the answer to that. There has been, and I think it depends on geography. There is one other license being actively considered, of course, for the city of Philadelphia. There's been chatter, and the Gaming Board Commission has not yet made a final decision as to if that license will be awarded, and if so, to whom. So there are some thoughts that there has been a saturation point. Our gaming revenues are down, not a lot, but they're down. Is that indicative of a saturation point? The casinos have provided lots of revenue to the general fund. From an economic development standpoint, I personally don't think that vices are necessarily the way to go. I think we should be looking at sectors like manufacturing and those types of industries to bring jobs back to Pennsylvania and grow our economy. So I can tell you that revenue's been down for gaming. There's at least one more license that's being considered as to whether or not it should be given at all. And happy to continue that dialogue at a future town hall.
And that's all the time we have. To everybody that's still on that wanted to get a question in, please leave us a message at the end of this call if you would. We need your name, your phone number, and your email address so we can get back to you even quicker. Pam, bring us to the finish line, please.
Well, that was thank you, Kurt. Thank you for hosting this evening. This has been great. We will be doing an in-person town hall in the month of July as well as August. Those dates and times will be announced via an email blast, posters and flyers, so please look out for that. And as always, contact us via email, telephone the office. Let us know what you think the priorities should be, what state-related concerns are out there that we should be looking to address. That's what I'm here to do. It's my pleasure to interact and get that feedback and input from constituents every single day, and thank you for being on the call this evening.